afternoon, and thank you for being here. My name is Nikki Soliday. I'm the Executive Director of the Historical Society. I am very pleased to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience that we have not seen in a long time. It's great to see you here, especially on probably the most beautiful day that we have had in months. And I would say there's only one thing that would bring everybody out, and that would be a program by Neil Fasnacht. So we are delighted that he has finally agreed to do this. I've been twisting his arm for years, and he always has an excuse, even though we know he doesn't go to Funland in February. But finally, he has agreed to do this, and he has spent weeks working on this program. So I'm sure you will be delighted. I will not capture your attention for too long, but I do have a few very important announcements that I think may be of interest to you. First and foremost, we have just added a tour to our tour calendar for the year, and I will say two words to get your attention, and that's Downton Abbey. So if you can think about that program that everybody seems so connected to and so interested in, we have just added a program to go to Winter Tour to see. It's an exhibit of the costumes from the show. So we have information on that. It's a day trip, so we'll leave from the society, come back the same day. We have sign-up sheets in the back. Alice and Jan from our Trips and Travel Committee are here. They can answer any questions that you might have. The trip is looking to be priced around $110 right now. We do not have a lot of details because we literally just added it a few days ago. But you can see either one of them for more information. And again, it's a trip that we feel will probably sell out fast, so certainly try to get signed up and get some of that information. Second thing I'd like to announce is that the event that we capture most everyone's attention for every year is Preservation Weekend. This has become a very important event for us. And this year we're going to be celebrating 75 years of history at the Hershey Park Stadium. So if you were a part of our event a few years ago at the old barn, celebrating the historic Hershey Park Arena, I promise you this will be of the same magnitude. Lots of community events, a great price for families for a daytime event, and a great price for the evening dinner program. We will be holding it somewhere on site within the historic arena and stadium complex. We will have more announcements about that coming up soon. That date is September 26th and 27th will be the whole weekend. And just one other thing, you may note that we are filming this program. We try to do that regularly so that we can post these videos for our members. It is a new section on our website for members where we will post any of the programs that we have. We post special photo archives, stories, remembrances, and just note that this video will be up online in approximately a week. If you're not a member and you'd like to consider having this program to view or any of the other special interest programs that we have online, please consider membership. And if you are a member and haven't signed up yet for the website in the special member section, please do so. If you have any questions about that, you can see me, you can see Art at the end of the program, and we can describe how to do that. Now, without further ado, I will say only two words again, Neil Fasnacht.
Thank you, Nikki. First thing I have to say is, this is my first attempt at PowerPoint. So please bear with me today as we muddle through this. I have to thank Nathan Ginder, who is not here, but he is largely responsible for helping me put this program together in a PowerPoint presentation format. I'd also like to thank Art back there on the camera, who worked diligently with me getting it up and running. I want to thank Nikki for badgering me for 3 years to present you with a little glimpse of my collection. It's an interest that began a little over 20 years ago, and it started with a simple question among friends. Someone asked, when did Milton Hershey die? And I thought to myself, well, I know it was around the end of World War II, and I got to thinking more and more. I was a little embarrassed at how little I did know about the man and the town, and so I started studying and getting hold of everything I could. And that's where my passion began. Now, my wife and daughter might say it's an obsession, but at this point I'll say it's a passion. Lastly, people have often asked me what I consider to be my most valuable thing in my collection. I would simply say that the item I value the most, like the commercial that says priceless, is this small trade card that my daughter made for me when I first started collecting. One of which I have wrapped around these 100 Hershey bars. So everybody that behaves today will get a Hershey bar when they leave. This card here was designed by Lauren, again, after a degree in graphic design. and a stint with a letterpress designer, and it is also one of my most prized possessions. So with that, we'll begin our program. I hope. Can everybody hear me pretty well? Okay. This is where our story begins, with this little girl from Swatara Station, Emma Strickler, and her request of this young man seen here in a swimsuit in 1879 to write a sentiment in her autograph book. It would give us one of the earliest and most profound looks into the mind of Milton S. Hershey. In April of 1879, just months before that picture of 21-year-old Milton was taken, he wrote these words: "One is only happy in proportion as he makes others feel happy, and only useful as he contributes his influences for the finer callings in life." This page in young Emma's autograph book is the only artifact you will see this afternoon that is not part of my collection. It is in the collection of the Hummelstown Area Historical Society. Coincidentally, Emma Strickler would later marry James Fox of Hummelstown and become the daughter-in-law of Dr. Thomas Fox, the man who brought Milton Hershey into the world. These pictures of M.S. Hershey were taken about 60 years apart. I want to concentrate on the other fellow, Edwin Holt, because he is critical to definitively establishing the identity of young Milton here. But before I do, I'm going to shamelessly engage in a little promotion. While this photograph was most likely taken in Atlantic City, I am holding out the possibility that Milton and his friend Edwin could have jumped on the steamer Sylvester in 1879, embarking out of Pier 12 in Philadelphia, and for an additional fee could have taken the railroad from Lewis, Delaware, and had their picture taken in Rehoboth Beach. For those of you who might not know, our family operates a business in Rehoboth Beach. This was pasted in a page of a scrapbook kept by Milton and Kitty, with this note that accompanied the photo on the opposite page. It reads, "Friend Milt, just a reminder of 1879, yours truly, Ed W. Holt." I have researched Edwin Holt, who in this 1902 National Jobbers Confectioners Association publication can be seen here representing the Hershey Chocolate Company in Philadelphia. He later would become that city's office manager. Moving on to Kitty, here we see her calling card and her monogrammed seal. This is my favorite picture of her, probably taken around 1900. The picture has obviously sustained significant damage and was pasted to a piece of Bristol board to preserve it. Now, I could never prove this, but I'm fairly certain that you are looking at the picture Milton Hershey carried in his wallet from the time of Kitty's death in 1915 until his own over 30 years later. This note in that same scrapbook, I can confirm, is without doubt in Kitty's hand. It reads at the top, "Verses and Poems to Keep." The quote seen here in its entirety is from The Masquerader and reads, "The best moments of a man's life are the moments when, strong in himself, he feels that the world lies before him." And what Kitty noted, quote, "Gratified ambition may be the summer, but anticipation is the ardent springtime of a man's career," end quote. Remember that at the time these words were written, Milton had just recently sold his caramel company for $1 million, perfected his formula for milk chocolate, and was building his new factory. And here it is as it appears in that scrapbook, along with clippings on mending china and bric-a-brac and offering bridge hints. Another of Kitty's personal possessions, her medicine kit, embossed with her name, is presently on display at the Hershey Story Museum. If you want to impress your friends, you can tell them that you know for a fact, and from a very good source, that Kitty kept her aspirin tablets in this lower drawer. Another of Kitty's personal items, this hanky pouch, required a little more detective work to prove its authenticity. To it was pinned this little note identifying it as belonging to Mrs. M.S. Hershey. It is important to note that it didn't just say Mrs. Hershey, because there were two, Milton's wife and mother, and someone purposefully made that distinction. Also, the fact that at one of the first ladies' card parties held at High Point, after M.S. had given over his home to be used as the country club's clubhouse, Milton came downstairs with several of Kitty's purses
and similar items and offered them to be used as prizes. Determining who wrote that note would ensure its authenticity. That came by comparing examples of Milton Hershey's name as signed by different men who were entrusted to do so. Notice the M right here. From this example, we can determine that this man, employee number 3, William Franklin Reynolds Murray, was the author of the note. Next, we will take a look at Milton, seen here at age 7. My photo is marked Hershey Studios on the reverse. Remember this image because you will see it again in a few minutes in a very significant piece. Now, does anyone know what this is called? If you said an opera hat, then you would win another candy bar, because a top hat that folds flat is technically referred to as an opera hat. This bowl would just be another nice early copper candy bowl if not for the note someone took the care to paste on the bottom. It reads, "One of Milt's first candy bowls from Ruth Bedeau." First, I'd like to point out that the reference to Milt again, which is the name some of his closest friends used when referring to him. Also of importance to note is that Ruth Bedeau used her married name at the time she gave this gift. More would probably recognize her by her maiden name, Ruth Hershey, who accompanied the Hersheys on several of their trips and can be seen here on a camel at the far right. Lastly, this came from the family that received it as a gift, keeping in an unbroken line of ownership. Remember, provenance, that is determining authenticity, is very much about proper documentation and tracing the chain of ownership. One of these trips Ruth went on with the Hersheys was to Colorado, where this deed was executed. She signed her name as a witness to Milton and Kitty's signatures on the deed, which sold 2 strips of land to the Pennsylvania and Reading Railway Company, on which they would build 2 rail sidings from their main line into the factory. The sale price was $1. One of Milton's more unusual signatures I have is on this golf ball. Henry Picard signed the opposite side, and as Hershey Country Club's pro, very likely may have given similar examples out as souvenirs to professional golfers participating in either the PGA Championship held here in 1940 or one of the many PGA-sanctioned Hershey Opens held in the 30s and early 40s. I won't go into details, but I think this inlaid wood cigar box may have been a presentation piece or gift from Picard to Mr. Milton S. Hershey. I do know that these 2 mementos, along with a country club membership, were given to each in attendance at a dinner in 1930 at which Mr. Hershey turned over all but 2 rooms upstairs of his home, High Point, to the community to be used as a clubhouse for Hershey Country Club. Fortunately for me, and the value assigned to the surviving examples, many of these keepsakes on the left were not kept, but rather smoked. This deed, signed twice by Milton S. and once by Catherine S. Hershey, is to the house built on lot number 1 in the newly formed town of Hershey. Located at the east end of Trinidad between the silos and the new food bank, it was deeded to Gabriel Trump in 1904 for $1,550. That's Catherine with an E. From all my research, it seems that the Hershey's lawyer, John Snyder, was the only one who insisted on spelling her name C-A-T-H-A-R-I-N-E. This is an interesting document dated June 1911. In it, Milton Hershey is applying to the Court of Common Pleas, in which he respectfully praised the court to appoint Robert Von Ida to act as policeman in Hershey Park. During the Depression, more specifically the summer of 1933, M.S. Hershey signed FDR's certification of compliance, adjusting Hershey Estates employees' hours of labor and wages. And here is a postcard M.S. sent from overseas congratulating Bert Black on the establishment of a YMCA in Hershey. The EC stood for Egbert Charles. Another signature, one of my favorites, appears on this American Caramel Company stock certificate. By the way, these are not his signatures. It had a value of $10,000 and is one of perhaps as many as 20 such instruments that were used in completing the sale of the Lancaster Caramel Company for $1 million in 1900. While John Snyder is said to have been insistent on the deal being an all-cash purchase, It is thought that it was more likely an 80-20 cash-to-stock transaction. Issued to M.S. Hershey in 1901, it was redeemed about 14 months later. Best of all, it was signed by witness William H. Lebbie Lebkicker and M.S. Hershey. My favorite Milton S. Hershey signature appears atop this autograph portfolio, one of which was presented to each of those in attendance at what was billed as his surprise 53rd birthday party. The bigger surprise, however, was that Milton was behind the staging of his own surprise party. He had his housekeeper send out invitations to what was basically the who's who of Hershey to attend in costume a party at the tea house. Milton jumped out to everyone's surprise and presented all with a portfolio with his name signed at the top, and each then circulated theirs for all to sign. It is extremely rare because, except on a legal document, Milton S. Hershey almost never signed his full name. Here again appears Milton at age 7 with the caption, "When I was a boy." I know of only 2 of these around today. Here is Milton Hershey's shaving mug with a note tracing its provenance through Harry Erdman, Hershey's gardener extraordinaire. Here are some other shaving mugs that came from Tom Black's barbershop. What is unique about these is that someone, perhaps Tom himself, wrote a short descriptive note about the owner and put it in their mug. My favorite example is B.F. Ben Beitelman's, which reads, "Unable to read or write, but was a very hard worker. He prided himself in being able to outwork everyone." And here's lawyer John E. Snyder's shaving mug. Mr. and Mrs. Snyder relaxing with Milton Hershey, I believe in Cuba. This is an R.S. Prussia chocolate pot with matching cups and saucers circa 1900. The provenance contained in a letter of authenticity reads in part, "In 1900, Milton Hershey packed a carton of newly minted chocolate bars and sent it to his only competitor in the world, Daniel Peter of the Swiss Nestle Company, a veiled marketing challenge coated with a sweet gesture of respect. Peter accepted the gift and the challenge and promptly returned this chocolate set to acknowledge their common bond and passion. Further research discovered that there were originally 4 sets of cups and saucers with the gift." Another unique item is this hand-painted Wedgwood china plate commemorating a dinner held in Milton Hershey's honor in 1894. It is one of 9 made, 5 of which I believe have been accounted for. The men belong to a coaching club in Lancaster called the Tally-Ho Club, and this plate belonged to Bill Blair, Milton's partner in the Lancaster Caramel Company. His name can be seen in the 12 o'clock position with the whip around it. I have been fortunate to have had 3 of these plates in my possession over the years. On the reverse, we see places visited by the Tally-Ho Club, like Paradise, Kinzer's, and Bird in Hand. This interesting alarm clock comes with the story of an enterprising person who made 5 of these clocks and presented them to Milton Hershey with the hopes that he would approve of their design and they could be offered for sale at the Hershey Store Company. MS supposedly nixed the idea, leaving only 5 of these in existence. This certificate, signed by Admiral Richard Byrd, was awarded the Hershey Chocolate Corporation, expressing, quote, "their enduring appreciation of the most valuable cooperation in the equipping of the Byrd Antarctic expedition," end quote. Now I'm going to get on my soapbox for 30 seconds. One aspect that I think is somewhat overlooked and deserving of more attention is Hershey Chocolate's contribution to the war effort, particularly in World War II, in the form of field ration and tropical bars. Hershey earned a remarkable 5 Army-Navy E for Excellence production awards for their efforts. Only about 4% of companies engaged in war work received even 1 award. Hopefully there will be a small display here in the future that will highlight this significant contribution. And while I am generally loath to say what I think Milton Hershey would say or think, I do think he was very proud of his company's achievements in this regard. Here is a trade card dating to the 1870s, which I believe was another harebrained scheme by Milton's father, Henry Hershey, to capitalize on his son's business. Whether he actually ever established this store just blocks from his son's Spring Garden confectionery works is unknown. Note, oyster and ice cream, not uncommon for the time. This is a letter from Milton's Uncle Elias on Hershey Chocolate Lancaster stationery, detailing arrangements for traveling from Lancaster to Derry for his brother Henry's funeral in February of 1904. Another of Elias's signatures appears in one of my oldest Hershey-related artifacts, a book with the note giving it as a reward to his pupil Lizzie Emmerich while teaching at Derry Church School in 1866. Some of you may remember Elias's son, Ezra Franz Hershey, Milton's first cousin and treasurer of the Hershey Chocolate Company. My grandmother was Ezra's secretary for many years. Here we see two very interesting checks that dealt with money loaned to Hershey by the National City Bank of New York. They are both signed by Ezra and Company President Bill Murray, payable to ourselves, dated 1920, and were for a total of $1.4 million. Ezra's stamp signature appears again on these national currency notes from 1929. Hershey was a national bank chartered with the U.S. government, and like many other national banks, issued their own currency. Their value was usually backed by U.S. bonds that each bank deposited with the United States Treasury. This Greengrass Jingle Book, circa 1915, contains 14 different pictures. All 14 of the original drawings are either in my collection or with the Hershey Museum's holdings. My favorite is this one, featuring a black waiter and the caption, "Here am your cocoa." And here's the original artwork. This was not really politically incorrect for the times. Here's an original painting used for the cover of this booklet, promoting the town, its products, and Central Hershey, Cuba, dating from the late teens and early 20s. Another was used to produce this colorful 1926 publication's cover. An artist's mock-up of the iconic Kissing Kids. One used to promote Hershey's Kisses as delicious, wholesome, and pure. From 1919, Hershey's sweet milk chocolate stands the world over as the best. A bird's eye view, or we might say today a kissing tower view, of the early factory. You Lutherans might recognize your church out here somewhat relocated, but imagine the Hershey Bank right beside it, and then the Consolidated School, the only building reasonably close to where it is today. And another used even a little more artistic license to relocate the entire Homestead complex from out here along 322 down to where the zoo would be. Here we see an example of artwork used to produce a box top label. And beautiful, finely detailed original artwork used in producing one of my favorite early bar wrappers. And here are a couple of early labels, again showing the beautiful artwork that was used in early Hershey product packaging. Two of my favorite boxes. And this image was used years earlier on a 22 by 28 inch tin sign. A few of my favorite posters and stand-up advertisements, certainly appropriate for this winter. Hershey's syrup. A windmill of favorite products. And how many remember the Aero bar? A couple of trolley signs. Beautiful point of purchase pieces from the 1930s. The earliest store window display from 1910 called Brookside Farm. Another more elaborate one featuring the town of Hershey. It's easy to see that cows and fresh milk featured prominently in Hershey's advertising. This 1930s Art Nouveau display featured this little guy, Hershey's Chocolate Soldier, created by artist Vernon Grant. If he looks a little familiar, perhaps you grew up eating Kellogg's Rice Krispies. Vernon Grant was also responsible for introducing us to Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Now now some of my favorite items from Milton's businesses. M.S. Hershey's first patent in 1881 was for this candy case, now on display at the Hershey Story Museum. This is one of only 2 cases known to have survived to the present day. Here are some stock trade cards from Philadelphia years advertising himself as a confectioner and fancy cake baker. And this trade card, circa 1881, also on display at the museum, is the only example that I know of that advertises M.S. Hershey as an ice cream manufacturer. Perhaps the rarest piece of Hershey product packaging is this 6 by 6 by 3/4 inch deep 1-pound Hershey's Fine Caramels box. It is from his New York years, circa 1883-84, and the only example of any product from New York that I am aware of. Here we see the printing plate used to print the distinctive Hershey script that was used in advertisements and on stationery for his New York business. The smaller prints may have been used for printing candy or caramel wrappers. This is the National Confectioners Association's certificate of membership to the Lancaster Caramel Company, dated 1892. A wood shipping crate end panel, and seen here with runners attached to both sides, which I feel were used to keep the crate itself suspended off the ground and act as shock absorbers to reduce breakage when shipping Crystal A glass cases like this. Here is a wood box which held chocolate, vanilla, and walnut caramels. And just a few wood dovetailed boxes from Lancaster. Just as real estate is all about location, 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 collecting these early pieces is all about condition, condition, condition. And that has a lot to do with the condition and percentage of label still intact. My rarest Lancaster piece, which again can be seen in the museum, is this 5-pound tin. An example of which can be seen here in Milton's 1020 Chestnut Street store that he opened in Philadelphia from 1901 to 1904. He actually had working machinery off to the right showing how milk chocolate was manufactured, like a little factory tour of sorts. The tin can be seen better here. This dish was used in that 1020 Chestnut Street store. Some examples of Hershey Lancaster trade cards. Hershey also used a battleship series of 16 cards, and shortly after the sinking of the Maine in Havana Harbor in 1898, had these cards overprinted with the clever wording, "Remember, the main thing in making a good cup of cocoa is to use Hershey's." The only truly dedicated Hershey's trade card, meaning that it was made just for Hershey, circa 1898, featured many of the company's products on the table. It was called Bittersweets because the boy is clutching chocolate to his chest while a bee is on his nose. It featured these 2 backs: "Don't wreck your nerves with tea and coffee or ruin your stomach with trashy substitutes," and "Indigestion hath power to mar the soul's serenest hour." Some early Hershey tins and novelty boxes. This is a shelf sign right here in the middle. Lancaster boxes and molds. Hershey also produced mint-flavored chewing gum from 1915 to 1924. 6 sticks for $5, you cannot deny. Hershey's chewing gum is the best buy. Along the top here, you can also see the progression of cocoa tins. Here are some of the machines I've collected. And my favorite is this honey bar machine. And these 2 promoting Hershey's for health. Some salesmen sampled dummy bars made of wood, not chocolate. And here we see Biscrisp. I believe still Hershey's shortest run bar. A couple of my favorite Hershey Park, that's 2 words, souvenirs. From the Park's arcade, this game called Juggling Clown. You put your coin in up here at the top, use this knob to turn to move the clown side to side to try and catch your coin and have it returned to you. I hope you won more than just your coin back, or the house would never lose. An early license plate topper. And a few more, including the Rose Garden and the Zoological Garden. Even a popcorn and ice cream bar bag. I know I may have crossed that line from passion to obsession here. This is a metal thermos engraved Hershey Chocolate Company that was used in the office reception area to serve hot chocolate and cocoa to visiting VIPs and guests. Well, I probably made everyone hungry and thirsty with those last couple of pictures. And I see by my pocket watch that was repaired by John Scholl of Dairy Church, and incidentally, its 1-year warranty with fair usage ran out just over 117 years ago. That we're running out of time, so we'll jump aboard the trolley and head for the end of the line. I will close with a few examples of what has truly remained my first and greatest passion in collecting Hershey, the postcard. How else but on these real photo postcards would we know what the 1911 Hershey High girls basketball team looked like? Except for 1910, there were no yearbooks in these early years. Or what the schoolroom they attended would have looked like. Or this view of Shakespeare's store delivery wagon pictured here on Bowling Alley Hill, or as I think it should be renamed, Pothole Hollow. Notice the sign painter ran out of room because Bill Shakespeare spelled his name with an E on the end of it. Or what an early refreshment stand in Hershey Park looked like. No problem telling what they sold. Or this image of the YMCA float ready to ride in the 10th anniversary parade in 1913, and more impressively, the Boy Scouts behind it holding this sign, which proudly proclaims, "We hiked here from Lancaster." And the wonderful educational information contained in so many messages, like this one stating, "Was all through this place today and found everything clean. They send out 12 carloads of chocolate every day." And some of my favorite captions. M.S. Hershey's home, the owner of the town. These are some of the improvements at Dairy Church. And there, in that proud sentiment, lies a talk for another time. And along the same thinking, a proud Dairy Church resident rightfully refused to surrender their identity to the intruding developers. One of my favorite images shows a sheet tied to the front of a Hershey trolley advertising employment opportunities. Wait, how did this get in here? Okay, I felt somewhat compelled to close with this, and not just because I knew Ernie Accorsi, whose family business this was going to be here, but also because of this significant date, December 12th, 1954, significant in my history. So with a plate imported from Germany for Hershey Park flipped over, I will wish all a happy Washington's birthday. And I'll leave you with this thought by a Hershey resident who wrote it just over 100 years ago, but it is just as appropriate today. This is a fine town in summer, but not in winter. I do have some of the items that I featured up here if you want to take a look at the original picture of Milton Hershey and some of those things. There's going to be some late refreshments in the back. My wife was baking chocolate chip cookies all day yesterday, so please eat some. And we have some snacks and lemonade and iced tea, so thank you.